Welcome to the first Boxscore Geeks podcast. We are excited to have the entire Geek staff here. Thanks very much to Brian, who brought this all together. We're so excited about what's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully you saw all of our previews. You've seen our great bets. I'm actually going to let the man, the original Boxscore Geek, Patrick Minton, talk about the site and his vision for the future.
Thanks, Dre. Yeah, we're really excited about things we're going to do here, and I got to say, I'm really glad that both Dre and Arturo approached me about doing something together, because last year, as the NBA Geek started picking up a little bit of traction, I found myself in this position where, well, either I can write articles or I can make these cool tools that I've really been wanting to build for a year now. And this gives us an opportunity to do both, because now we got 3 guys that can write, 3 guys that can code, 3 guys that can model. And we're going to be able to make lots of great stuff for you, not just good stuff to read, but also great tools to use to evaluate players and teams, to make your own predictions. Basically, all the things that the number crunching geeks that follow the NBA are really hot after. We're basically going to do some really cool stuff for you guys, and I hope you guys keep checking in with the website to look at the new features we launched.
And then Arturo, I was curious, did you want to talk at all? I think our first big push was a huge collaboration between Patrick and Arturo. The previews, probably one of the coolest preview lists on the web, the most comprehensive. Arturo, your first previews and where you want to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to kind of just say that, again, as Patrick said, I'm really glad for the opportunity, and I think this is going to be a great project moving forward. Here's where my value, or like where I think the value is for this, is like I want a place. I need a place where I can go and get all my stats and get all my numbers and actually see what I want to see. And I think Patrick has done a great job in his old website of doing that, and I think by bringing in some of the stuff that we're going to be bringing in the future with some of the other steps we're going to be bringing in, we're hopefully going to give you something as fans, like, much like, I'm also a fan as well, where I can go in and actually see this and understand what's going on. That's kind of what we're trying to do with the website. So to me, it's like, it was great to like do the preview and then actually see it. It's like, and see this and see how great it looks and how much sense it makes and kind of how, we can identify what the problems might be going forward. And, I really kind of feel like I got the best grasp of the season I've ever had actually going into the season. I think that's the value of what we're doing.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that the reason I started the NBA in the first place is because the kinds of advanced statistics I couldn't find them anywhere on the web. And I was just tired of waiting for people like David Berry to publish statistics. And so I would watch games and I would say, well, I think Kevin Love is their best player. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's their best player, even though everyone says it's Al Jefferson. But I just wanted to be able to go out, push the numbers somewhere, and be able to point at a table and say, yeah, every day this thing's updating, and yeah, every day it looks like Kevin Love's really the best player according to the numbers. Because, like Gray's fond of saying, you cannot always trust your eyes in the numbers. I think all 3 of us, there's one big mission that we all understand. All 3 of us think that the numbers tell the story. And that's
absolutely. And you and I were in the same. You and I are in the same boat, Patrick, and that's actually when we're talking why we're so happy to be here and what we're bringing to the table. You and I basically had similar sites where we were doing similar tools, and I saw yours and went, oh my God, I've got to be working with this person because they're the only other person on the web doing similar stuff to me, and candidly, the Boxscore Geek tools were better. So, it's kind of like if you're the best player on the Charlotte Bobcats and Michael Jordan's on a team and offers you a chance to be on the team, you're like, I got to go play with Michael Jordan. I got to win a title.
Analogy.
Yes. I'm happy with that.
That'll be the first and last time anyone compares me to Michael Jordan.
So I do consider this. I consider this essentially joining the 1996 Chicago Bulls. It's when Arturo and Patrick, when we were all talking about possibly getting together. That's how I viewed it. I don't care if I'm Tony Kukoc on that team. It's being on the Bulls.
Yeah.
So. Oh, go ahead, Arturo.
Yeah, I was gonna say, look, I've got a million spreadsheets, right? And spreadsheets are great, and they tell me things, and I can kind of look at it and manipulate the data, but it's not easy. It's not nice. It's not friendly. And I think where we want to go to is where we want to take all this information that's out there. And people are talking about like the big data revolution, all this information that's available. And information is great, but I've made my career of getting all this information and getting it to like 4 or 5 pieces of like relevant data. So like you can see a million points of data, but you want to get the 3 or 4 or 5 that actually tell you something, and that's the point that we're trying to get to. And rather than me having to go with like a million spreadsheets, I'd like to get to the point where like as a team we get it to like we can just go in and just look at, you know, here's the specific question I want answered, and we can get close to getting that answer from the data. I think
and on the specific questions, let's hop into our first topic, which is players.
Mm-hmm.
So our site, which by the way, we're talking about wanting to build great tools. Boxscoregeeks.com already has a bunch that you can use. So if you go to boxscoregeeks.com/players, hopefully that's going to get queued up for you as you're watching. We're already updating as the season's progressing, so we can see which players are playing best, which players are playing worst. And one of the first things we wanted to talk about was some of the players that are surprising us. I'm looking over to get mine in front of me. So I'm going to start with you, Patrick. Throw out 2 or 3 names, good or bad, players this season so far that are surprising the heck out of you.
Well, I'm going to pick 3, and I think one's obvious for everybody. And then, so the first one I think that's obvious is Michael Carter-Williams. I mean, we're talking about small sample sizes here, but that was obviously a rookie game from the ages. I was saying before, if you compare games by rookies, it's up there with when Magic Johnson went off in the finals, or when Sam Cassell went off for 30 in the finals. I mean, it was an amazing performance by a rookie, and I can't help thinking that 9 steals says a lot. You know, shooting is one of those things. Everyone can have a hot day every once in a while. Like, I'm sure someday Nick Young is going to hit every once in one of his shots, but that's not going to make him a good shooter. So I'm not blinded by shooting.
Let's not get crazy.
9 steals. I gotta think there's got to be some talent behind that. 9 steals is crazy. Okay, and the other 2 are probably a little more obvious to most people, but I think Dwight Howard and Kevin Love are both surprising in the sense that both of them look like they're back to their old selves, where, you know, Dwight Howard last year was one of the better centers in the league, obviously, but on the scale of Dwight Howardness, that's not very high. But this year, it looks like the Dwight Howard from like 2009 Orlando is back, and on a Houston squad that's already got some good players, that should be terrifying for the rest of the league. And Kevin Love also looks like he's back to his form from 2010 and 11 when he was the league's best rebounder, and he was nailing threes, and he was doing lots of other little things, and he's actually looked absolutely amazing in the first couple games. So, small sample sizes, take that for what it's worth, but those are the 3 players that sort of kind of grabbed my attention.
Absolutely. And I love Kevin Love. He's on my fantasy team. Michael Carter-Williams, I was watching that game. We were talking before when this started how I was watching that at a restaurant, and they switched right with like 3 minutes left when they were up, and that drove me nuts. So on that note, Arturo, are there any players left on your list? Did Patrick choose them all? Are there 3 new players you can think of that are impressing you, or do you have to repeat yourself? Repeat Patrick.
I'm gonna repeat on Michael Carter-Williams. The point being that I watched that game, and it's actually kind of scary. I mean, when they have to pull out Oscar Robertson to get you a straight comp for your first game, you're doing something right. I mean, again, I think it's going to be inconsistent. We're going to see it. What really impressed me, and Patrick hit on it, is the steals, the turnovers, and the assist ratio. It's crazy. I mean, the assist plus steals versus turnovers. The guy has good handle. That's impressive. As he said, the shooting comes and go. When you do that kind of thing, that's something that can help that team. I think the other player on that team is playing really well, Spencer Hawes, which is kind of somewhat of a return to form. I think it's actually kind of interesting that, we've done some analysis which will come out at some point during the season on coaches. Doug Collins was really bad. He comes out really poorly in that analysis. And the Sixers switched from having Doug Collins as their coach to now they have a Spurs assistant in Brent Brown, and that actually seems like it's going to help that team a lot. Evan Turner is another guy who's actually playing really well early on in the season. Another player to watch, and probably this in a negative sense, is Derrick Rose. Actually, through 2 games, is the worst player in the league. I don't know if this is going to hold, but he came back and he hasn't looked great. His shot selection. I mean, he's been in our collaborator, sometime collaborator. Miami Heat Index actually kind of talked about it, where like he's just kind of his shot selection seems a little off right now. And again, you got to watch. He's playing better this game, but really we have to watch it, because if he's not what he was, then this team is in real trouble. I think the other one that's been impressive to me is Miles Plumlee. for Phoenix, who's actually looked like a for-real NBA center to do the games. I watched a fair amount of the Phoenix games, the first 2 games for Phoenix, and he's been good. I mean, he's doing all the things you want your franchise center to do. I mean, again, small sample size, and we were talking about this before, and Patrick was saying that before when he's seated in college he looked like an NBA center. And sometimes what happens with our college model is when guys are on really good teams, it's sometimes hard to kind of differentiate them. And it happened with David Lee. It happened with Joakim Noah. Maybe it happened with Miles Plumlee. If he actually is what
happened to Al Horford.
Al Horford was a little more attractive, but again, all these guys who played on these teams that were loaded, kind of sometimes their numbers aren't as good. But I was going to say, if Miles Plumlee is this guy, then Phoenix is actually a pretty interesting and good team too. Yeah. Same thing with Sixers.
So I was going to say, Arturo, you cheated and did 4, but I'm content with that because you guys took some of mine. So I'm going to do my 2, pretty stereotypical for different reasons. One is Chris Paul. Yeah. Best player in the league right now. Just absolutely absurd. He does it year in and year out. Patrick, we did a post a while back about Gary Payton as Hall of Fame worthy. Basically, Chris Paul was right next to Magic Johnson being the best point guard for 5 out of 6 years that he was in. This year comes out, he's going to have one of the best primes for a point guard ever if he keeps playing like this. The other player, and this is actually for an opposite reason, LeBron James has been playing well, but he's playing poorly for LeBron James. And that's actually hurt the Miami Heat. We're watching the Heat. LeBron James is their best player, but if he's not their best player at amazing, or the Miami Heat rotation isn't better, that team could be in trouble. So I'm not too worried. We were talking small sample size. LeBron James is coming off one of the best seasons ever. But after 3 games, LeBron James looks great. He's a top 15 NBA player right now. But, I mean, that's after coming out of being one of the greatest seasons ever.
Yeah, he went from top 15 of all time to top 15 this year. It's kind of... But, again, this is one of the things we talk about this all the time, small sample sizes. I know there's people out there on the internet right now that are telling us how we're full of shit because look, the Suns are 2-0 and I think the Jazz are 0-2, and we're going to say small sample sizes. So obviously we're saying it this way too, but we've only had 4 days of NBA action. We've got to talk about some things or this podcast is going to be pretty boring. So we're going to pick small sample sizes and talk about that.
Yeah, I always make the point on that. It's like go back to the Bulls' 72-win season and go look through their losses. I believe the Raptors, who were an expansion team, actually beat them one night. I think they won 10 games, and one of them was over the 72-win Bulls.
I think that team lost 2 in a row too, didn't it?
Yeah, it's like
and it lost to the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah. So I mean, even the best team of all time in the regular season lost games to terrible teams.
Right.
Because it's just the vagaries of the schedule and it's just the way things break sometimes. I think that Lakers-Clippers game was just the way things break. Sometimes some team's going to make every single shot, and you're not going to be able to beat them,
Yeah, I think I'm going to quote a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, who said the story of that game was any team can beat another team as long as they shoot 33s and make at least half of them.
Yeah.
That's the story of the Clippers game. Any team that takes 33s and makes more than half of them can beat any other team in the NBA. That's really all there was to that game. But.
So speaking about teams, I think that was our next topic, and the player that highlighted this to start, I know is definitely going to get us into the preview that got us probably the most attention, which is the 76ers. So hopefully an article, we called it the 76ers, the Scrappy. I forget, did Arturo write that or did Patrick?
Well, I wrote it based on Arturo's data.
Yeah, I mean, it was a team effort, but I'm trying to really
let's be clear, just so we give credit where credit's due. All this data came from Arturo, right? I mean, for every preview came from Arturo. But we obviously couldn't make him write the close to 30 articles in 8 days, or he'd have gone crazy and would have had to take a vacation from his job. So Dre and I stepped in and picked some of our favorite teams that we wanted to write about, and we took those and wrote those. And for me, that was the 76ers because ever since last year. Basically, ever since Sam Hinkie came on board, I love this team. I'm not saying this is a great team. I'm just saying I love this team. Like if I had to pick any team that I got to take over, it would be this team because they're in such an incredibly great position, which is really surprising given how royally screwed they got by the Andrew Biden trade. It's really surprising that they're in this great a position right now, and I think it says a lot about some of the really smart things that Sam Hinkie's done. And I thought it was amazing. I think we all thought it was amazing, but it was really ridiculous how, Bill Simmons and Jalen Rose did a huge preview, and they started with their worst team in the league, and they spent 12 minutes basically saying this was the worst team of all time. And nobody on the internet was like, Bill Simmons, you're high. That's crazy. Everybody just kind of nodded their heads and went along with it. And it just doesn't make any sense. If you look at this roster, there aren't superstars on this roster. It's not a good team. Of course it's not a good team. But they don't have any truly pathetic players, right? Darko Milicic is not on this roster. The 2009 version of Michael Beasley is not on this roster. Brian Mullins is not on this roster. Tyrus Thomas is not on this roster.
According to Arturo, the only below-average player, meaning negative, costing them wins when he's on the court, is Darius Morris.
Right. I think people need to understand that, to be the worst team of all time, it's not enough to just have bad players. You need a couple of guys that are just abysmal. A couple of guys where you're essentially playing 4-on-5 or worse when they're on the court. And you don't have any guys that bad, right? So I looked at this team and I was like, this team's going to win 20 games in its sleep, and it's probably going to go for 25 or more. And people are talking about worst team of all time, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. And so it's been really fortuitous for us that they won the first two games. None of us is going to sit here and say, oh yeah, we totally called it that they would beat the team.
Yeah, that's definitely not.
Because the Wizards are a decent team too. But I mean, it's really been fortuitous that this has happened, and I think, small sample sizes be damned, I think these two games have shown that they don't have any truly horrific players on that team. They got a bunch of guys who would be serviceable 6th, 7th men on lots of teams. Evan Turner, Thaddeus Young, even Spencer Hawes, the way he's playing now, totally serviceable 6th, 7th man. And to say that that's the worst team of all time, it doesn't do justice to any of those 90s Timberwolves teams.
All right, Arturo.
You guys have short memories.
Hop in with.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, I think that it's important that the design philosophy behind that team is important. And it's something that they've kind of brought in from Houston and teams like San Antonio where there's, as Patrick was saying, there's no terrible guys on that team, right? So here's what happens when you don't have any terrible guys on your team. All it takes is one lucky break. So if all of a sudden you draft a rookie like Michael Carter Williams and he turns out to be greater than what you thought, right? If you've got a team that is composed of, not great, but NBA level players that can win 30 games, you throw in a guy who's playing like a star or a superstar, or somebody like Spencer Hawes makes a leap, or somebody like Evan Turner starts playing better, then all of a sudden you go from 30 games to 40 or 50 games won, right? So if you have a team like that, it doesn't take a lot to go to the next level. Whereas if you have a team where you have crap on your roster, and pardon my French on that, if you've got Chris Kaman and Nick Young on your team, then it can actually kind of be really, really bad to go to the next level. And I think that's kind of the key in team building that some teams get and some teams don't, right? So you shouldn't get married to team players who are not any good, for whatever reason, sunk cost is what kills these teams. So the story of the Sixers to me is kind of you have a fairly decent roster, it's well coached, or it's decent. It's not great, as Patrick is saying. But again, if you get lucky, right? So if the draft is a bit of a lottery, so if you just so happen to get a guy who's actually better than his numbers and he starts playing like that, then all of a sudden you go from being a decent team to kind of, you go to being a playoff team. And I think that's the difference. And again, it's a short sample size. We don't know if Michael Carter Williams is this, right? We don't know if Spencer Hawes is back to form. We don't have enough data yet. But if they are, and you throw in... Go ahead.
After a 2-0 start, who wants to take the under now?
Well, no, and I made this point, even in see, people forget, it's a tank here, a lot of people are going to lose. Yes, a lot of people are going to lose, right? If you look at their schedule, 16 wins in a year, where they're going to be playing, in April, they're going to play, after the All-Star break, they'll play 10 games or 15 games against teams that are not going to be trying to win, right? So just on that alone, it's 16 games was a ridiculous win number. right? And again, I think right now, I mean, that 16. There's no way this team wins less than 16 games. It's just not happening. I mean, I'd actually they kind of look like to me more like they're going to be on the range of 40. It'll be interesting to see how long they hold, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when some of the other guys come back, because I do think that they got guys they shut down that might actually come back in the second half of the season. So it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me about the whole Hinkie project is that the internet overreacted to a couple of things. One, he didn't hire a coach forever. He took forever to buy a coach, and he didn't hire a coach before the draft, which basically signaled to the internet that he didn't want the coach to have influence over who they drafted. And two, I think he had 9 players on his roster in like August. I mean, he just took his sweet-ass time filling out a complete roster. And everybody drew the conclusion then, oh, well, he's just trying to lose. Where, I think the three of us agree, no, he just wasn't trying to waste money. And he understood that the coach isn't that important yet to this rebuilding team. And two, there's no reason to spend salary cap money on a team like this. Especially on roster spots 10 through 15, there is no reason to go up. There's no reason to go out and pay somebody like Juwan Howard $2 million a year to play. There's no reason to go grab some NBA veteran who's not going to move any needles any more than the veteran minimum. There's just no reason. And if you look at the roster, the roster spots 10 through 15, they're all young guys that they're just going to give them a tryout, basically, and see if they can perform or not. And that's exactly what you should be doing. He's holding $20 million in cap space in case anybody in this season gets desperate. And it'll happen, and gives him a huge bribe to take a bad contract off of him. He's sitting there waiting for that to happen.
And what I was going to say, Patrick, you've got one of my favorite lines in your article about this. You say, these facts led most analysts to believe that Philadelphia wanted to lose. I disagree. I think it is far more likely that management does not care if they win. So you got it right. They're not being like the Knicks, who freaked out when they couldn't get LeBron James and went and overpaid for Carmelo Anthony and overpaid for Amari Stoudemire. This team said, we can't get the players we want to win, so we're just not going to waste the money. And then not only that, you're talking about you and Arturo have talked about waiting for another team to do something stupid. Think about the draft. They got Arturo and I. We're watching the draft and we're scratching our heads. I seem to recall if you look at wages of wins, and so I think Noel falls to
Noel, yeah.
He falls to the 6th. And then the 76ers trade essentially a replacement level shooting guard for
the best pick in the draft.
For the best pick in the draft and for a draft pick. So one of the rules we talk about, if you wait long enough, a team will mess up and do something stupid in the NBA. The key is to just not have your roster. So, like, New York can't take a contract if they want to now. Their roster is so screwed up they cannot take a contract. So, by the way, on that...
And does anyone think that, like, waiting to hire, like, the bench coach from San Antonio was a bad idea? I mean,
no, of course not. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's kind of, and again,
I was going to end our team point on, and so you talked about this, Patrick. I've got this open. You went out to Vegas. We had all this analysis that Arturo had done. We crammed it in before the season.
Yeah.
You put a bunch of money on. One of your big bets was you put $500 down that the 76ers were going to win over 17 games.
And I've been complaining that I didn't put enough money on that since I did that.
Well, the big one, I know we want to talk about a few wacky predictions at the end, but a few of the other ones that I figure we each get one. So I'm going to call out one of your bets. Figure we've talked the 76ers enough. I want to call out the Knicks. This is your biggest bet. Knicks went under 50. Arturo's got this at a 98.6% probability. You put $1,000 on that.
Yeah. There is no way on earth that team is going to win 50 games. Unless a big trade happens. They're trotting out a lineup where they're playing Bargnani and Melo at the same time. They're a defensive seed. They have pretty much a terrible wing rotation, right? I mean, and it's only going to get worse when J.R. Smith gets healthy again and starts getting minutes. This is not a 50-win team. I think right now they're actually sort of exceeding our expectations again in the small sample size. And the reason they are is because guys like Prigioni are getting more minutes than he would otherwise get. Once Smith comes back, his minutes will shrink again. It's just that's not a good team.
they beat Milwaukee, and they almost blew that game, and that Milwaukee team's not a good team. They also they also won at Chicago. Sorry, they lost at Chicago, and Chicago really kind of got like the worst. It was there's an argument as to whether that's the worst game performance we've ever seen for a player from D Rose. Even though he made the winning shot, his numbers for that game were terrible. Like there's an argument that it might be his worst game ever. So I mean, I watched a significant portion of this. Like Bargs is Bargs. I mean, like there's a beat writer. I will call him out by name for the Raptors, who basically every game thanks the Knicks for taking Bargnani off their hands.
Yeah.
It's a terrible roster. You know, Melo's in a free agency year. It's going to be a train wreck. This is like a bunch of knuckleheads playing together. You know, if there's any team that could incite a riot at a basketball game, you know, if I had to like pick a team to do that this year, it would be the Knicks, because it's just it's the craziest bunch of guys. It's like a team put together like let's get every shooter that we can find, and just like, you know, let's just get more shooting, right? So you just said if there's a big trade, here's the thing, and connecting the dots, there's this whole CIA agent thing going on. Like the guys who are at the outside looking are apparently Shump and Tyson Chandler, who are actually kind of probably their two best players. So if there's a trade, I would probably say that the two guys most likely to get traded for the Knicks are probably Tyson and Shump. And Knicks fans are probably like wanting to shoot themselves right now. But it's
where the trade that's coming. It's going to be Tyson Chandler for Brook Lopez straight up.
No, it's going to be the one I like. The one I like is J.J. Redick and DeAndre Jordan for Tyson Chandler and Iman Shumpert. I like that one, and I think that's realistic.
Okay, so we've listed two, the 76ers and the Knicks. I was curious, Artur, I don't know if you have it up in front of you. Like I said, it's under the articles. It's called the NBA Geek Goes to Vegas. But yeah. Arturo, you of course seeded a lot of the information that went into these bets. Mm-hmm. So what was, out of those two, beyond the Knicks and the 76ers, what's your favorite bet? And I'm going to ban you from saying 76ers winning the division. So I'm going to call that just the same.
Well, I, this year I'm a Sixers fan, so let's just leave it at that. But because I'd like to go to Europe next year. So all I'm going to say about that is I like the Knicks bet, because I think the Knicks bet is biggest way. I think it was community mandated public service. They had to give money back to the gamblers. So that's what I think the Knicks under was. I like that one. I kind of like the Jazz over. I think that's a fun bet. I like that team. I've watched their two games. I think their coach might be really incompetent, actually, from watching those two games. But it's a fun team to root for. I mean, Hayward is great. Hayward kind of had this great duel at the end of the game with Bledsoe. He's fun to watch. He takes these great shots. He's a good player to watch. I mean, that's a fun team. I like it, and that's a team I'm gonna, league pass team. Them, the Sixers. I think the Knicks, because I like to laugh. I think that Lakers team, rooting for the under that Lakers team is going to be fun, because I actually think D'Antoni's actually going. This is the kind of team that D'Antoni excels at, because he's going to take as many crazy threes as possible, because he understands that with a crappy team, what you got to do is take 43s a night, and he's going to do it. That's
one of my bets, Arturo.
Yeah, Vegas had caught on to the Lakers pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the number ended up at 36 for the Lakers. I have a Twitter bet on that with the Lakers, which is like, if the Lakers go the over, I have to change my avatar in the offseason to Magic Johnson. So, I'm kind of not hoping that happens. I actually do think this is a team that actually gets worse once Kobe gets back, because they can do some damage by playing the kind of style they're playing now, which is just play crazy, forget about defense, and take as many threes as you want. I think once Kobe gets back, that's not the style they're going to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think...
that's a bit ironic, because Kobe's a better guard than any guard on there, but still, it's going to work against him.
Yeah, but stylistically, yeah.
I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Hawks. We really liked what they did in the offseason, so I'm happy with that one. It's a safe bet. It's an easy one, but I was happy with that. I was going to say the very last thing we wanted to get into, I don't think we have an explicit screen for that. I'll try and mention any if they come up. But we are each going to get kind of two crazy predictions. And they don't even necessarily need to be crazy, but two predictions for the season. Obviously not like preview stuff. We've already talked that, but just things that might happen this season that we think. We've already kind of talked a few, so you brought up a few crazy trade scenarios, but I'll throw it back to you, Patrick, because I know you mentioned a few before. What are 2 crazy things you could see happening this season?
Okay, so I think my bet for first coach to get fired is Mike Woodson, because he's coaching a bunch of misfits and he's doomed. That team's not. That's going to be a 500 team at best, except that all of his bosses think it should be a championship level team. So he's going to get fired because of not living up to expectations. That's pretty. I think that's actually a pretty safe bet. Like, if there were any that kind of futures betting going on, that'd be what I'd be putting my money on. I think that Brett Brown, actually, if this keeps going, is a really good candidate for sort of really coach of the year kind of talk. And I think my MVP prediction is that it's not going to be LeBron James, and it's going to be a player in Houston. I can't tell yet if it's going to be James Harden or Dwight Howard. The safe money's probably on Dwight Howard if the old version of Dwight Howard is back. I think that's where the safe money is, because that team's going to win a buttload of games, and he's going to basically have sort of the past history. James Harden will obviously score more points, but he won't have sort of that tradition working for him. I think it's going to be a lot when LeBron James had his first year in Miami, where if he performs to the level that kind of everyone expects, then that's where the voters will all flock.
Yeah, I could buy, but just looking at history, because I've written a lot about the MVP. If Harden scores close to 30 points a game and the Rockets hit 60 and are the best, he'll win MVP. Unless Dwight Howard does 20 and 20, it'll
he
be
won't.
What?
No, he won't. Neither of those guys is winning the MVP.
Really? I'm gonna. So obviously we're on.
You're missing the obvious narrative. Who's going to win the MVP? Who's back?
I'm asking you this. So why don't you?
Who's back?
You've got a crazy prediction up for ready. So who do you think's winning the MVP? My question is
Rose.
Gentleman's bet you and Patrick can put on this, because you're already throwing it out. So
Derrick Rose is, as much as I like James Harden and Dwight Howard. Actually, my first crazy prediction is that I actually think I got the over/under on Houston wrong, in the sense that Houston's going to be better than my prediction. Houston's going to be closer to 65 than 60, because everything I've seen so far, I've watched the last preseason, last couple games. That team basically just shrugs people off. I mean, Dallas tried, but I mean, they can do anything. They can play defense. They can shoot threes. They've got. I mean, Asik just looks great on defense.
That team is nuts, because if A, they got the old Dwight Howard, and B, they're going to be able to play Asik next to Howard a lot. Oh, that team is just a beast.
Yeah, I think that team's going to be closer to 65. I think they're going to shut out some team. This is going to happen. This is my crazy prediction. Houston will keep some team from scoring through a quarter. A team will put up a goose egg against an Asik Dwight. Some team some night is just one of these bad teams is going to go into Houston and just not going to be able to hit a shot for a quarter. I don't think it goes for a half, but I think it's going to be. They're not going to get anything for a quarter, and it's going to be just going to kind of be kind of sad, but it's going to happen. I mean, that team is just kind of crazy on the post. I think, and the other crazy prediction is I think, and I like Derrick Rose for the MVP, because I think Oklahoma's not going to be quite as good. I think Miami's not going to be quite as good because they're older and they don't care. I think Harden and Howard will split the vote, and I think if the Bulls go out and win 56, 57 games, which is what we got them at, and Derrick Rose has 28 to 30 points a night, Derrick Rose is going to be the MVP. And he's not going to, it looks like he's not going to deserve it, but he doesn't look like he's going to deserve it. And I'm hearing all these stories about how great it's that he's back because he hit that last second shot. He sucked the rest of the game, but he hit the last second shot. So, hey, Derrick Rose is back. He's the MVP for the Bulls, right? And he's going to be the MVP for the NBA.
I think we're all missing a dark horse candidate here. But I think Kevin Love has a shot at it if this keeps going.
You got to win 50 to win the MVP.
You got to win 52. The lowest.
Well, let me rephrase. If Kevin Love keeps playing like this, they're going to.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is a crazy version. These first 2 games were nutso. I mean, just absolutely crazy. It's the Kevin Love that we saw in the first half of the 10-11 season, where he literally broke Arturo's model.
Yeah, I basically don't like that roster as much as I like the roster last year. That's my biggest worry for people.
It is a roster that scores a buttload of points, which is really important.
Yeah, Yeah, but that team looks like that team's look like maybe it's a 6 or 7 seed out west. You know, you got to be a top 4 seed to get the MVP, and I don't think T-Wolves are going to do it. I think again, it's going to be it's either Rose or LeBron or Durant or Chris Paul or Harden or Howard. I think the Clippers are a little worse than we thought, and I don't think Chris Paul's going to get that respect. He might, but I don't think he's going to get it. And there'll be too much love for Doug.
Chris Paul will never win an MVP based on how things have gone.
Yeah, and he should, but he's not going to. Well, he might win one after he wins a title. If he wins a title,
I think Chris Paul would have had a chance at it if he did the things that Nash did back in the day, which is he went to a terrible team and then all of a sudden they were amazing, and people realized, oh, what's the X factor here? It must be because of Chris Paul. But
he would have won the 2007 MVP, but he ended up losing a late season game to the Lakers. 2008. He ended up losing a late season game to the Lakers and losing the 1 seed. And it's a national game. It was, and there was this whole thing about how if he won the game and whatnot, and it kind of swayed the voters. I think that was the year for him to actually win it. I think right now, again, I come back to it. It's going through logistically and who's going to get the credit. It's a high scorer on a team that's improved, and that's going to be Derrick Rose. So I mean that's. We're gonna hate it.
Again,
he's going to be the MVP.
Again, I'm gonna stand by dark horse with Kevin Love because if he keeps playing like this and they win 50, then you're looking at a team that won 30 last year without him and won 50 this year with him, and he'll probably score 26, 27 points doing it. That's a pretty powerful narrative, and we all know the voters love narrative more than they love truth.
I love Harden and Love. So I'm gonna end with my crazy prediction. A lot of talk goes into mid-season trades, and what people don't realize, I've done a ton of research on this, is superstars do not get traded mid-season. It's super rare. It's happened with Jason Kidd. It happened with Dikembe Mutombo, but typically it doesn't. I think this is the season we see 2 or 3 mid-season superstar trades. Now understand when I say superstar, I'm qualifying by using wins produced numbers. So I think Fareed, and you guys brought up Chandler, and I'm sure there's at least one other player, possibly even Kevin Love, which would be, it's possible Kevin Love wins MVP if he ends up on a good team. I could see 2 or 3 superstars getting traded, and that would be absolutely bananas because that does not happen. Teams do not trade their best players, but I could see Fareed and Tyson Chandler going and possibly one other.
And the thing I love about prediction is the fact that the Celtics are the best trade machine team this year. They've got pieces to help everybody with the trade. They've got draft picks. So if one of those blockbusters go down, I'm betting Danny Ainge actually has some action in on it. So I'm actually happy. I think that actually bodes well. I agree with you on that. I mean, I think there's a lot of teams with weird motivations.
I want to tack on another crazy trade rumor, and that is that I think a player with a $15+ million contract is going to get traded to Philadelphia. Not necessarily a good player, and it's going to be a bribe. It's going to be similar to when Kurt Thomas was traded from the Suns to the Sonics, because Hinkie is sitting on some assets. He's sitting on $20 million in cap space. He can absorb things. I think it's going to happen, and I think that'll be.
Milwaukee's another team in a similar position. Milwaukee's in a similar position. They're at the minimum.
Yeah, but Milwaukee's not as smart. They don't have a smart manager.
Yeah, no, I think Hinkie. I think the trade partners to watch. I think Hinkie's one because he got a bunch of assets. The Celtics because they've got all those draft picks and they've got all those kind of interesting pieces that work for other teams. So that's another one. I think. There's some interesting trade partners out there. There are owners in the league and GMs in the league that privately will say that they're kind of looking at what they have and they might be willing to blow it up if things don't go their way. And that's my way of saying I can't divulge my sources. But yes, they're guys who definitely are going into the season with that kind of mindset. If 30 games in it doesn't look like it's going to work, you'd be surprised about some guys that just got signed that might just get moved before the deadline.
So I'm going to end us because we're just at about time. I'll throw out one other tool if you, for whatever reason, are not aware of this. This is a time sink. It's the second greatest tool, and we're working on making it the greatest behind the ESPN trade machine, which is Patrick's comparison engine. So if you go to boxscoregeeks.com/players/compare, you can compare any players. So if you're looking at possible trades, I think your famous one, Patrick, is LaMarcus Aldridge versus Kevin Love. That would be a hell of a trade to see happen this season. It won't. That would be fun. But if you want to take a look at any kind of the trade rumors you're hearing, look at Kenneth Reed for anybody of similar cat value. It just will not happen. But definitely check that out. And rest assured, we'll be talking more. We'll be doing more podcasts. Brian, we are so happy to finally have a producer. So this is awesome. If you've got specific topics you'd like us to talk about, of course, comment on the blog. We do have a comment section. You can tweet at us. I'm at NerdNumbers. We have at Arturo Galletti. We have at NBA Geek. And then, of course, we also have the Twitter handle for the Boxscore Geeks itself, which is at Boxscore Geeks. Anything else you guys want to end on?
I think I want to say that one thing is that we're going to try to give you a nice regular post schedule. So look for on the site. We'll try to have something up every day around what we're doing. And it'll be somewhat regular on different pieces. So we will try to have that up and actually get that as the season goes on. That's my job and my commitment to you guys, that we'll get that content up for you so you can have something to look at every day. And I think to Dre's point, we're also doing, all the numbers are getting updated at 5 a.m. Eastern time. So if you want to see what happened and you want to see who the leaders are, you can actually do that. And I'm pushing on this for the guys. We're working on getting something out there where we'll be able to see what the results of last night's games are. And that's one of the tools we're working on, which I think is going to be really fun for everyone.
Yeah. One last thing. If the Sixers win that division, then there's going to be a big party in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Arturo and I will be hosting. We'll probably be at the Ghost Bar or maybe the MGM Grand or something. It will be a big party.
Yes, there will be.
I'm all right with that. Okay, so Brian, do we want to stop recording?